Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Fan Meetups chat brought to you by Fan Expo Canada, located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm Jeremy Johnston, and I'm here with my friend and
Angelo Gorzino.
That's right. And we are the Fan Meetup ambassadors, and we like to bring content to you, usually once a month, sometimes more often than that. And we always like to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And we're usually talking about Adventurers League, which is the organized play campaign that's now in its pseudo 11th season, so to speak. And it offers a lot of opportunities to meet and play with different people at stores, events, conventions, restaurants, pubs, or even in your own home or that of a friend that you might be playing with.
And now especially online play.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's gotten quite popular on Discord. We run our own Discord server under the banner of Unite the Factions, so you can check us out at unitethefactions.com. And we are really looking forward to hopefully hosting some in-person Dungeons and Dragons events in the near future, and eventually at Fan Expo later this year.
We're going to try something with our next event where we're going to have a split in-person and online component to try to keep tabs with all the people that we have hooked into our community online over the course of the pandemic. We are currently still at the tail end of, it seems.
Yeah, but things are looking up. It looks like Toronto Comic Con will pop off without, any debilitating restrictions and such. So hopefully that means, a lot of great guests will be able to make it out. And of course, anyone who wants to check it out can do so. Anyways, today we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons classes. We're talking about 5th edition, which debuted in 2014. And there's a lot of different source books that have come out between that time and now, and they continue to publish books. So we just want to give everybody a quick overview of all the different classes and options that you have available, and we'll try our best to give you a good introduction to them.
Absolutely. And the first class that we're going to be discussing is we're going to be going in alphabetical order. So the first class we're going to be talking about is the Artificer. Now, Artificer is one of my favorite classes. It's incredibly strong. It's incredibly versatile. You're a class that can make magic items and kind of use them yourselves or give them to your allies to kind of help them out. And the bare bones, basically the thing with Artificers, you're kind of like Iron Man. There's even a subclass of Artificer that allows you to have like a suit of armor that has lightning guns. That's pretty much Iron Man.
Totally.
Later levels, you can even fly with it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely what I was going to mention, because Iron Man has to fly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you start off with just some basic abilities. You start off with spell casting. You get cantrips and your spell casting right away, even though you're a half caster, which is different than all the other half casters that don't get their spell casting until level 2.
It is an intelligence-based class?
Yes, it is one of the 2 intelligence-based class in the game. They added it in with Eberron, and then again in Tasha's. They put it in, which was the only one, which before the only one was Wizard. Basically, with Artificer, your bread and butter is being able to make items, infuse them, and hand them out to your allies or use them for yourself, depending on what you want your playstyle to be. You're the tool master. You have expertise in tools once you hit level 6. And you have one of what I consider the strongest base abilities in the game at level 7. You get an ability called Flash of Genius, which, as a reaction, a creature within 30 feet of you fails an ability check or saving throw, you can add your intelligence modifier to that check as a reaction. So, someone's casting Disintegrate on one of your wounded fighters, and your wizard tries to counterspell. They only roll a 13 on their check. You can Flash a Genius and make that somewhere between, hopefully, if you have at least 3 intelligence, 16 to 18, and have your wizard counter that spell.
Yeah, that's really good if you're Carlo, who seems to be disintegrated by me quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. I don't know anybody who's been disintegrated a lot by you at all. Never.
it's also worth mentioning that the spell casting of the Artificer is a little bit different. It's similar to some of the other classes in that you get to choose your spells from the Artificer spell list after you finish a long rest. So,
Correct.
like once a day.
You also have a really interesting ability where, as long as you have your tools on you, you do not need to follow the regular spell casting rules that all the other classes do, and you can cast spells with your tools or with your infused items, um, and ignore basically needing Warcaster for things like casting shield if your hands are full.
Yes, and they're your spell casting focus as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting how they're the only class that gets to do that, and I think that it was done specifically because they're kind of like a Swiss Army knife class where they're not going to be the best at anything in particular, but they're good at almost everything. So that they're very versatile.
Yeah, it's kind of the intelligence version of someone who was jack of all trades.
Yeah, it's kind of like the inversion of that, so to speak.
Yeah.
The other very interesting thing with Artificers is the only class that lets you break the attunement barrier. Every other class in the game only allows you to attune to 3 items. Over the course of the Artificer's lifespan, you can attune to 4, 5, and if you hit level 18, I believe, 6 different items you can attune to, which is absolutely insane considering you also can attune to any item, regardless of class restrictions. So you want to be that Artificer who's got a Staff of the Magi in one hand and a Holy Avenger in the other, you go nuts.
Yeah, and you can use them both. It's
break those attunement laws.
Yeah, well, just being able to use the weapons too, right? Because unlike a wizard, they can actually use or have proficiency with more weapons.
Yeah, and Battlesmith is kind of like Hexblade, where instead of using strength or dexterity to attack with, you can attack with your intelligence modifier using weapons, which is very fancy, because it allows you to do things like have a magical greatsword and a magical longbow, and have both sharpshooter and great weapon master for if something gets close to you or something's far away.
Yeah, and although we're not going to talk a lot about multiclassing, that is a great reason to multiclass if you also wanted to be a certain type of wizard.
Yeah, Bladesinger Artificer is kind of fun. But again, we've done a multi-class video already. You can catch that on YouTube, and I believe we talked about that actually. So, not much more to say about the Artificer other than they've got 4 subclasses. One's kind of makes all kinds of potions. The Alchemist. There's the Armorer, which we talked about a little bit. That is effectively Iron Man, or you can have big thunder gauntlets where you can punch people with instead. Kind of fun. The Artillerist, where you're going to have lots of little mechs that shoot things, and you're probably the best caster Artificer. And then Battlesmith, which is you have a robotic kind of companion. I've used both a dog and a skeleton in previous campaigns. You can kind of flavor it to be whatever you want. It's not really restricted in that regard. And they're the ones that we were talking about that you can use your intelligence modifier to attack with instead of strength or dexterity.
That's the Steel Defender is what they call their I'm not going to say pet, but companion.
All right, so that's going to conclude our bit on the Artificer. What are we talking about next, Jeremy?
Yeah, so following along is Barbarian. So just as a side note, the Artificer is not part of the basic rules, but all of the other classes are. So if you want access to the Artificer, you're going to have to need to buy either Tasha's Cauldron of Everything or the Eberron book. But the basic rules are free. You can access them through the Dungeons and Dragons website, or you can even get them on D&D Beyond, which is pretty much the standard of digital tools for creating and managing characters for 5th edition. So just to kind of finish off about basic rules, you only get access to one of the subclasses for each of those classes that you get for free. If you want any of the other options that we might be talking about, you would have to invest in the books for that, or maybe find a group where you can either share the resources online through the campaign sharing in either D&D Beyond or Roll20 or similar, or borrow a book from your library. as a lot of the Dungeons and Dragons books are there, or you can borrow it from a friend. So Barbarian is the next class, and I'll just throw it out there now because Angelo and I were having a conversation about it before. Conan the Barbarian, if you were to create it in 5th edition, is probably not a barbarian. I mean, you could make it work, but we felt that he was more of a fighter, and maybe we'll get to that a bit later. But Barbarian is often considered a tank class, so they're going to soak up a lot of damage. They're going to have a lot of hit points. They have abilities that can lessen the amount of damage that they take, which is available to all barbarians. It's also probably, yeah, exactly, and it's also probably a class that you will not wear armor with. One thing that's important to understand is when talking about armor class, or that number that represents what you have to roll to hit that person, is that there's only ever one calculation that can be used at any one time. So although a barbarian can wear armor, it's either you take your unarmored defense feature or you take the armor that you're wearing. They don't kind of go together. You choose which one you want to use and you kind of stick with it. Whether that's higher or lower, it's up to you depending on the flavor that you're looking for. So yeah, the key 2 features I would say, to a barbarian is rage. And if you've seen the new Vox Machina TV series, they got a great part, I think, in episode 2, where they finally, go into their rage, which is where, you'll do a little bit of extra damage that scales over time, and you'll take half damage as long as you keep either attacking people or getting attacked by people. And that's a key thing to remember. If you want to continue raging, you better continue fighting or being fought.
And that does include punching yourself in the face to try to run to the next room really quickly, yep. Taking that half damage to keep your rage up every 6 seconds.
Yes, indeed. And sometimes you just want to keep that going because taking half damage is really great. And the only thing that you don't take half damage for with the right combos is psychic damage.
Yeah, so the base barbarian gets resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, and that's regardless of whether or not they're magical. And there's one particular subclass of barbarian, the Totem Warrior, where if they choose Bear Totem, which almost every Totem Warrior does, it's usually always Bear or Wolf that people pick for the most part. Other ones are great too, don't get me wrong. It's just that those are the more staple ones that people go for because of their strength. And the strength of the Bear Totem is that it allows you to take half damage from everything except psychic, as Jeremy was saying.
Yeah, that's the combo, and a lot of people do take it. But that's not to say that the other subclasses aren't worth taking either. There's a lot of feature with a lot of the subclasses for Barbarian. And there's even Barbarians that can cast ritual spells.
Yep. There's definitely some interesting things, like the Ancestral Guardians get Augury, which can be very useful, as well as, I believe, Clairvoyance, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Generally when you're playing over Barbarian, though, you're going to be that guy who's running in first, leading the charge with a big 2-handed weapon, swinging and swinging and swinging and swinging.
Yeah, and you're probably not using a shield because you want to just get in there, soak up all the damage, and just get those brutal criticals out there.
Yeah, which is another really good class feature of the Barbarian, because with the Barbarian from level 2, you get an ability called Reckless, where every attack that you make has advantage, but the trade-off is that any attack against you has advantage, which is fine because you're going to be taking half damage a lot of the time.
Totally, and that's if they hit you at all. So, I mean, hopefully they don't.
Even with advantage, I mean, you're probably going to get hit, but it's not going to bother you too much. You usually win the race when it comes to dealing damage versus taking damage.
Yeah. Another fun subclass, before we go to our next class, is the Path of the Zealot. It's almost like you got some, divine help, helping with your fury. It's kind of another layer on top of rage, where you can do some extra damage. It's also almost the unkillable barbarian as well. as you can rage beyond death as its final ability. So if you hit 0 hit points, it does not knock you unconscious.
Nope, you keep going. You're technically dead. If you
Yeah.
stop raging, you will die immediately. But as long as you're angry, you're still going.
Totally. So just make sure that someone heals you before you finish your rage.
Yeah, because you can be on 3 failed death saves because you still take death saves every time you get hit at 0 hit points. It's just you refuse to die, basically. All the different subclasses, just basically a very 2-second rundown. Ancestral Guardians, you're going to be defending your allies. Battle Rager, you're going to be giving spiky hugs. Path of the Beast, you're going to, when you rage, you turn into some kind of beast form, whether you get big claws or a giant scorpion tail. That's kind of cool. Berserker, you get really, really angry. You push yourself to exhaustion to attack more. Storm Herald, you kind of do some weird things with lightning. It's okay. It's not my favorite, but some people really like it. Totem Warrior, we talked about, is where you get the bear totem, wolf totem, and they give you various very powerful abilities. Zealot, Jeremy just went into detail with. And then one of the newer ones in Tash is Wild Magic, which allows you to do really cool things when you rage that creates like a mini Wild Magic surge, and all the effects are positive.
Yes.
And as opposed to
but we'll talk more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that one later.
Well, let's go to your favorite class there, Angelo.
Yeah, let's get to the my absolute favorite class in all of 5th edition, which is the Bard. The thing that I always say when you're playing a Bard is that when you're playing a Bard, you can be the best at anything you want that Bard to be. Yeah. You want to play a Bard that gets into melee and fights a lot, you pick Swords Bard. When you get magical secrets, you take cool things like Banishing Smite and like all things. And because of all of those things, you get, because of their strongest class feature, which is a magical secrets, which they get at 10, 14, and 18 on all Bards, that allow you to take any spell from any class list, which is absolutely bonkers when you can get 17th level Paladin spells when you're a level 10 Bard.
Yes. But you can also, if you want to, take cantrips from other classes as well, which some people do.
Because Eldritch Blast is very good. The other thing that Bards get is that every Bard gets is an ability called Jack of all trades. You become the absolute skill monkey. Every skill that you're even not proficient in, you can add half of your proficiency bonus to. Low-key things that aren't included on that list that people forget are things like initiative, counterspell checks, dispel magic checks, telekinesis checks, as well.
What does it not do though? It doesn't give you bonuses on saving throws,
which hurts a little. But if it gave you bonuses on saving throws, it'd be even more broken than it is. Totally. I could probably talk about Bards for an entire hour, so I'm just going to be very, very brief with the different ones. Creation is one that's pretty brand new. That's kind of interesting. It allows you to do some cool things and bring some things into reality that you're not really able to kind of do with any of the other Bard classes. It's probably, I would say, the most unique Bard. College of Eloquence is a really, really crazy good ability that allows you to unsettle your opponent and give them minus your Bardic Inspiration die, which can go from a D6 to a D12 to a saving throw as a bonus action before you cast a spell or before someone else casts a spell. And it is absolutely bonkers because that is super good. They also get Silver Tongue, which basically gives them persuasion and deception reliable talent at level 3. So they have that ability to not roll below a 10. Going really quickly through the rest of the Bards. Glamour Bard, you're going to be moving your allies around or taking on an appearance that makes you really hard to hit or allows you to command other people. It's kind of flavorful and fun. It's also somewhat powerful once you get, because Mantle of Inspiration is one that allows you to, let your allies move away without opportunity attacks as a reaction, which can be very good to reposition your team. Lore Bard is my personal favorite. You get an extra magical secrets at level 6, which allows you to take things like haste, fireball, counterspell, lightning bolt, spirit guardians, revivify even if you want to.
Cutting words.
And the ability Cutting Words, which pairs up very well with telekinesis, because when you make that contested check, you can force them to subtract your Bardic Inspiration die from that roll, which is very fun. I could talk about lore all day because Peerless Skill level 14 even makes it even better. Spirits is one that I'm not is probably the only one that I'm not particularly familiar with. It allows you to kind of use ghostly presences to buff your allies a little bit. It's also kind of fancy in that regard. When you roll a bardic inspiration die, you get a very specific ability from a list, and it's kind of neat. But it's the one that I definitely know the least about. Swords is another one of my favorites. Defensive Flourish is a very powerful ability. It allows you to add a bardic inspiration die to your damage, and then also adds it to your armor class for the round. So it's kind of like you can get some pretty crazy armor classes with that. Valor Bard allows you to buff your allies with the bardic inspiration that allows them to use it for armor class and damage, which most of the other bards can't do. But it also allows you to wear medium armor and use all weapons and shields. So you can become that frontline or tank bard if you wanted to, with things like Tensor's Transformation later on with your magical secrets, or even things like Swift Quiver and be a super archer bard at level 10.
Yeah.
And then College of Whispers is kind of like the psychic bard. You get a rogue sneak attack. You can kind of take people's visages. It's very interesting on how it's like the selfish bard. It's really it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And before I talk about bards more, because I could literally fill an hour, let's move on to the next class.
Yes. All right. So this is one of my favorite classes. This is the first of the 4 core classes to D&D, the Cleric. So the Cleric is super versatile because each one of their subclasses is pretty much like one of the other classes in D&D. And right out of the gate, you are pretty tanky because your armor class can get pretty good because you start with shields and you start with, some medium armor proficiency, and some of the subclasses will give you heavy armor proficiency as well. So it's quite easy to be, first level and, maybe disadvantage on stealth, but, 18 armor class with your starting equipment and such. Also, like the Artificer, they are a class that gets to choose their spells at the beginning of every day. And I need to say that Clerics, yes, people are going to rely on them as the healers of the party, but you don't need to be that kind of Cleric. And that is one of my favorite lines from players is, I am not, that kind of cleric. Right? So I'm going to go down the list of all the different domains, because as a cleric, your powers are divine and you are getting them from a god. So you do get to potentially add an interesting story element to your character right out of the gate by choosing a god, either from the world that you're in, or potentially create one with your dungeon master, and see how they fit. So the Arcana Domain is naturally about magic, and it's kind of like the wizard subclass of being a cleric.
The only unfortunate thing about Arcana Cleric is that their only really, really super good class feature comes at level 17 or 18. But it is bonkers.
That is correct. It allows you to pick a level 6, 7, 8, and 9th wizard spell, and they are cleric spells for you, and they are always prepared.
So you can have wish and divine intervention on the same character.
Correct. And but right when you take that domain, and all the domains are selected at first level, you can cast some wizard cantrips as cleric spells. So if you prefer the wizardy type of cantrips versus the ones that clerics normally use, which are more save based than attack rolls, then that might be the class for you. And it's got a bit of flavor to it as well. The death domain is not to be confused with the grave domain. The death domain comes from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it sounds really cool, but having played it doesn't actually work that well.
It's very dependent on your channel divinity, and as more and more things become immune to necrotic damage, it feels less and less good.
Exactly, because that is the extra ability that you get at second level. Each of these has a different channel divinity that you can use multiple times over the course of the day that come back with a rest. So after Death Domain is Forge Domain. And yes, you're basically an armorer. You have the Blessing of the Forge with right away you can make items magical, giving it +1 to attack and damage roll. Or for armor, you can give it +1 to AC, which is, pretty great. You don't even have to do it, necessarily to
Your own.
yourself. So you could help the party if that's the way you like to play it. And although not super useful in Adventurers League, in non-Adventurers League games, their Channel Divinity of Artisan's Blessing allows them to forge magical items. As long
mundane
as
items.
Yeah. As long as it's not worth more than 100 gold pieces.
One clever thing I've seen in Adventurers League is a party was behind bars and they turned the bars into swords and broke out of jail. It was kind of fun.
Oh wow, that is hilarious. Wow. Yeah, or just forge the key that you need to.
No, they just took the straight up bars and made them into swords, and I was like, well, I guess you guys are out of jail.
So it kind of rounds out again at 17th level where it gets its best ability potentially.
Immunity to fire damage is never going to be bad.
No, it isn't, and that is pretty potent to get immunity to anything, and you get resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing while you're wearing heavy armor.
From non-magical, but still, that's still very good.
Yeah, it means you can walk around and be even more tanky. Knowledge Domain is a bit of a skill monkey, more than anything else. But it does have a really cool Channel Divinity that you get later at level 6 that allows you to read people's thoughts. So definitely very interesting. It also gives you a very useful ability that I've seen in other games called Object Reading. This is a capstone ability, not super useful, obviously, in combat, but story-wise, you can hold an object, you can see visions of the previous owner. It's really cool.
You skipped Grave Domain actually, which makes me chuckle.
Oh, I'm saving that for last.
Okay, fine. You should have said something.
Yeah, well, no, I said it wasn't gonna be like Death Domain, but Life Domain is the best healing class in the game. It can even get better if you pair it with another multi-class.
Yep, which we talked about in that other video.
Yes, indeed. Next is Light Domain, which to me needs a better name because it's basically the fire magic domain.
They also get a lot of radiant, but yeah, their Channel Divinity is literally they become a sunburst.
Oh yeah, but they get fireball, and
yes.
So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Nature Domain is more of a druid-like domain
with heavy armor, which is fun.
Indeed, and you actually get druid cantrips at level 1.
Better than druids.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say. Next is Order Domain.
Order Domain is really cool. They let you get some fun things where you can, when you cast a spell at first level, like a first level spell on somebody, you can cause them to use their reaction to make a weapon attack. So that rogue is your best friend because you're giving them extra sneak attacks on your turn because they can use their reaction to attack when you cast a spell on them.
Yep. Peace Domain is the next one. You can basically empower people.
It's doubly blessed. Doubly blessed is kind of what you always hear with Peace Cleric because the emboldening bond acts as like a once a turn bless.
Yep.
Whereas bless, when you attack 4 times with bless, each attack has the D4, but emboldening bond can only be used on one of them. But it's still something. It's anytime you can add a D4 to an attack ability or save, it's always going to be good.
Yeah. Next is Tempest Domain. You're essentially like a thunder and
my personal favorite is Tempest.
Its best ability is definitely its Channel Divinity, where you can do maximum damage with a lightning or thunder spell.
Yeah, Tempest Cleric is amazing. You pull down that 9th level Call Lightning for 90 damage, and then you action search and do it again, and it always feels good.
Yeah, it requires multi-classing, but can be insanely potent. Trickery Domain is a little bit roguish, I would say. You get some charm-like enchantment spells and such. You can also, their channel divinity is really cool, and you can create an illusionary duplicate of yourself.
Jester on Critical Role was a Twilight Cleric. Sorry,
Cool.
Trickery Cleric.
Twilight Domain is got this insane feature.
Probably the strongest single feature in Dungeons and Dragons.
Dark Vision 300 feet.
Not that one that I was talking
and
about.
You can share it.
Twilight Sanctuary.
Yeah,
Twilight Sanctuary is the,
yes, that's the next one. That is, yeah. So you basically have this sphere that emanates from you. It's got 30 feet, and you're granting temporary hit points of 1d6 plus your character level for anybody in the sphere with you. And you can end the effect of charm or frightening status condition. So,
which, when you compare it to Inspiring Leader, which is a whole feat,
yeah,
they get that every 6 seconds.
At second level.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't have to wait for 4th level to pick a feat.
War Domain's kind of interesting. It allows you to get that one big burst where you can add +10 to your ally to hit at 6th level. That's kind of fun. It also lets you be kind of like a swingy cleric, but it's on the weaker end. It's very good for multi-classing. A 1-level dip gets you that extra bonus action attack a few times a day, which is nice.
And then lastly, Grave Domain is not that type of cleric. They're going to heal you when you fall down to 0, because their best ability, I think, is that they do maximum healing if you're at 0 hit points with whatever spell they use.
And then their Channel Divinity is your Paladin's best friend, because it makes the enemies vulnerable to all the damage of one attack.
Yep.
On the next hit.
And you can do Spare the Dying from a range of 30 feet, which is pretty good instead of touch.
It can be useful. It's very situational, but Spare the Dying in general is.
Indeed. All right, so let's keep going. What's next?
Cleric was a long one because there's a lot of subclasses.
Totally.
So Druids certainly exist. It is a class in Dungeons and Dragons. There's no secret that it's my least favorite class.
Okay.
But Druids are a very flavorful class that's going to allow you to do things like turn into animals, like summon a lot of animals, and based on the subclass you take, they're going to have different things that allow you to kind of improve either of those things. Like if you're a Moon Druid, you're going to be a stronger animal that can attack with magical claws and such and such. If you're a Shepherd Druid, you're buffing your summon army, and you better have a good way to do it quickly, or your Dungeon Master is going to really dislike you when you start having to roll for 30 creatures. Stars Druid kind of saved the entire class for me because it's very good. It's one of the few, it's the only one that I will suggest as a very good Druid. It is
really, come on.
Yeah, it's to me personally, it's the only one that I suggest as a very good Druid. It allows you to do things like have bonus actions to fire extra arrows. It gives you support abilities that allow you to add a D6 to ability checks or take away D6 from opposing saving throws, which is always good. And then your level 10, you can kind of swap that out every time you every time your turn comes up. You can switch between the Chalice, Dragon, and Archer form of your constellation, which is very good. Other subclasses to note: Spores is kind of cool. They kind of get this kind of spore pulse that does some poison damage that goes around. Land, it leaves something to be desired. It's supposed to be the spellcaster Druid, but it's just not as good at spellcasting as every other subclass that has spellcasting. That is a full caster, unfortunately, because they kind of hung Druids out to dry with that one, and I blame Wizards for that. But here we are.
But thematically, it works.
Of course. Druids are a very thematic class for if you enjoy that type of playstyle. Wildfire is another one that's also kind of cool. If Wildfire had Fireball, I would definitely consider that one a much better subclass. But unfortunately, it doesn't get Fireball, but it does get the cool Wildfire Spirit, which kind of like anytime you get like a little companion that's comparable to a Steel Defender, it's gonna be all right.
Totally. All right, so on to Fighter. Okay, so when we were talking earlier, we said that we felt that Conan the Barbarian from the movies is more likely a fighter. Fighter is like a very versatile class. Obviously, it's going to be primarily focused on weapons. They get the most attacks possible of any of the classes. Most of the other classes have 1 attack per round. They can have up to 5. And
with a bonus action.
Yep, and even the other classes at best have 2 or 3 with an offhand bonus action attack. So yeah, fighters. I mean, they can get pretty mathy if you are just going for criticals and you are going with the champion variant. I mean, you're just trying to roll as many dice by having as many actions or attacks as possible, and just trying to get those higher chance of critting based on dropping from 20 to 19 with your criticals,
and then eventually 18.
And late game 18. So when going through the player's handbook, you only have 3 options, but with a lot of expansions, they too have quite the long list. While not as powerful as older editions, where it was completely OP, Arcane Archer does make a return to 5th edition. While it's a really cool theme and works really well, I feel that it just kind of loses its power pretty quick, as you can't be doing this all day long with the different magic arrows that you have.
It is unfortunately the subclass that has the word archer in it, and it isn't even the best subclass for fighter as an archer.
Correct. Next is Battlemaster. Battlemaster is really cool. They have a lot of different maneuvers that you can use with the different attacks that you make. And you can even use some of them to aid others in battle. So if you want to be, grappling people or even disarming people, they're going to be better at it than others. They have
the only ones that can actually rules as written disarm somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen some really cool, adventures where that has actually, basically saved the party.
Then Tasha's added even more maneuvers. Battlemaster's really fun.
They are indeed. So Cavalier, is not a super popular choice, but thematically is pretty fun. If you want to bring a mounted character to the table, it's definitely a neat option. Although
they're also pretty good when they're not mounted. Even they're somewhat underrated because everyone thinks you need a mount. And mounted combat is kind of hard in 5th edition, but they're even good not mounted.
Yeah. Echo Knight.
Echo Knight's a critical role one.
Yes. So it you will need to well, what book is it from actually?
It's from Wildmount.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Guide. Echo Knight's kind of crazy. It allows you to do some really weird things because the Echo doesn't necessarily have to stay on the ground. It can kind of, because I will full disclosure, when they wrote this subclass and kind of printed it, it was kind of supposed to be for this world kind of only thing, but it's also, because it's in a published book, it can be used in some other places and your DM may allow it. It's not an Adventures League thing, but that's probably for the best considering how Adventure League can get.
So what is an Echo though?
The Echo is kind of like this weird shadow manifestation of yourself, and it can kind of go 3D, which I don't know if it was intended to or not, but inside it does say in any direction. So, well, I figure they meant on a map. People have said, well, no, any direction is vertical as well, right? So it can also do some crazy things like make its own opportunity attacks. So you can have your Echo beside something and it walks away and you can stick it in place with Sentinel. Echo Knight can be pretty good because of how weird the writing is. It's not very clear in a lot of things. But it also does allow you to get a free attack with Unleash Incarnation that doesn't require an action or a bonus action. It's just when you've taken the attack action.
Eldridge Knight allows you to cast some wizard spells.
Most notably Shield and Haste eventually.
Yes, but you are somewhat limited in the spells that you can choose.
You are considered a 1/3 class caster.
Yes. That said, you can make a bond with your weapon, similar to a warlock, and you can't be disarmed.
No, which is kind of handy because
Yeah.
Psy Warrior is
Mhm.
my personal favorite. It allows you to do some really fun things like telekinetically move allies, like shield them from damage with like a psychic bubble, or just add psychic damage to your weapons, psychic dice to your weapon swings, which comes out as force damage.
Yeah. The Purple Dragon Knight is good if you want to kind of help your party members.
It's a support fighter.
Yep.
It has all the kind of cool stuff like action surge and all the other powerful fighter features like extra feats. But it gives you a couple more support abilities. Most notably, when you action surge, you can get one of your friends to also take an attack action surge, which is really good.
Totally. Roon Knight, I think, is another one of your favorites.
Roon Knight is probably the strongest one that they've printed in terms of power. All the runes give you passive abilities that are all very good in like situationally, and the active abilities of runes turn fighters into having more reactions than wizards and other spellcasters with their runic shields, with their cloud rune, stone rune, storm rune, all sorts of different things that they get to do as reactions and bonus actions that let you do some interesting things. Also, eventually you become large size when you hit level 3, huge size when you hit later on level, which means that if someone casts enlarge on you, now you're gargantuan and a Roon Knight, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's insane.
And then last but not least, Samurai. It lets you get that fighting spirit so that you can pop up and have advantage on all your attacks as a bonus action, which is fun. And then gets a really fun ability later on where if you die at exactly the right time, you could possibly attack 12 times in a turn.
Insanity. Amazing. Next is Monk class. So Monk is a really unique class compared to a lot of the others. Not only are you not going to need any armor, you really don't need any weapons either.
You don't
And
need them,
especially,
no.
you don't need them. So, like, if you're in a situation where everything has been taken away from you and there is an anti-magic field around you, all of your abilities are still online. So, for that DM that's trying to, throw a party in a place where they've taken all their toys away from them, that can just really never happen to a monk.
It's even a classic thing in video game, like old school video games, where you had that one person who was like an unarmed fighter, and they were the one who leads the prison break. It's always kind of fun.
Exactly.
They've got a lot of cool subclasses, but we are starting to get a little low on time, so I'm going to go through them. We're going to go through them really fast. Way of Mercy gets you some healing abilities and such.
Yeah. Way of the Shadow allows you to teleport through the shadows, which is really cool.
Ascendant Dragon lets you use one of your unarmed strikes as a little fire breath or lightning breath or something, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, Way of the Astral Self gives you some astral arms that you can use to fight as well, and gives you extended reach. It's pretty awesome.
Way of the Cobalt Soul was on full display during Critical Role because that was the subclass that Bo played, and she was probably one of the stronger characters that have been on Critical Role in terms of a single party member.
Yeah. Way of the Drunken Master is really cool. Whenever you use Flurry of Blows, you actually get to disengage. So it's kind of a cool way to do some fighting and then just kind of mosey on out. Way of the Four Elements.
The Way of the Four Elements is kind of weak. It gets you some wizard spells that uses a lot of key points, but the cool thing that it gets is Fangs of the Fire Snake, which in the right scenario with the right multi-class, you can have like a bugbear punching people from 25 feet away, which is kind of fun.
Totally. Way of the Kensei gives you some additional weapons because Monk has specific weapons that you can use with your Monk abilities, but Kensei allows you to take that even further. And you can even use ranged weapons. I've seen some pretty cool kind of gung fu type.
It's how you play the John Wick monk.
Exactly.
The Way of the Long Death is kind of interesting. Like it does things where when you knock creatures to 0 hit points, it gives you some temp HP, as well as you can kind of spend a key point when you hit 0 HP to get effectively what is half orc endurance, where when you drop to 0 hit points, you pop back up to 1.
Mm-hmm. Way of the Open Hand is really the martial artist through and through. Nothing super OP, but they do get this neat kind of capstone ability called Quivering Palm. So thematically, that's where you can put your hand up against something, and you're just waiting, and you just do an insane amount of damage as soon as you kind of are ready to let it go.
Mm-hmm. And then my favorite monk, which is Way of the Sun Soul, because you basically become like a Dragon Ball Z fighter. You shoot radiant bolts out of your hands.
Yeah.
You change into like this sun form at higher levels, and you get cool things like effectively a fireball at 11th level. But it's a fun subclass.
Yeah. So Paladin is the next class. I hope nobody doesn't slam me for saying it, but it's basically like you put a fighter and a cleric together.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say.
Yeah. One of the cool abilities that they get that fighters and clerics do not is they have auras, and depending on the subclass you take, you get an additional aura that could be a benefit to your party or a bane to your enemies.
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing about fighters, though, is that not fighters, paladins, is that you get Divine Smite, which is one of the more powerful abilities in D&D, of the ability to stack damage on a critical hit. For example, you blow things up when you want to as a paladin with Divine Smites.
Yeah. So although you only get the 2 attacks with extra attack, unlike the fighter that can scale a little higher, that Divine Smite is really when you land that critical, and especially if you do some combos with some either Bardic Inspiration or a Divination Wizard giving you the roll that you need, you can do some insane things, and quite often a paladin can one-shot a boss battle.
Yep. The fun things, when people ask me what are the 2 hardest classes to run for at level 20, one is monk, the other is paladin.
Yeah, definitely.
Because monks are going to stun everything in your fight, and paladins are between the aura that means that you can't cast spells that are going to hurt anybody, and the ability to just blow up something with Divine Smite is incredibly powerful.
Totally. So let's talk about some of the subclasses here.
So some of the subclasses, Oath of the Ancients gives the one that gives you like a spell shield. Any spell damage that hits you or your party that are within your aura is halved before you make the save, if there is a save involved. So it can be quartered. And because it doesn't give you resistance, you can also stack on Absorb Balance to take an 8th damage.
And the other popular one from the Player's Handbook is the Oath of Vengeance, where you can basically pick one enemy and you're going to have advantage on your attacks against them. So again, more chance of critting so that you can just slam on all that extra damage from Divine.
I personally think that Vengeance is overrated, but Redemption is probably my favorite one. It gives you the ability to soak damage for allies with your aura, as well as when one of the monsters smokes one of your party members with a critical hit, you can blast them back with radiant damage with Rebuke the Violent, and I always think that's fun.
So the next class is a Ranger. Ranger gets a lot of hate, but I gotta say I've had tons of fun playing Rangers. They have a lot of abilities that help the group outside of combat. A lot of people are kind of combat heavy, but I think Rangers in many ways are the most versatile at keeping the party alive.
Especially if you're in like a survival campaign.
Exactly. Like their natural explorer ability means that they get to choose a favored terrain, and they get to choose additional ones at 6th and 10th level where they don't have difficult terrain. You can't be lost except by magical means. They can forge twice as much food if that's a thing. And they're also going to be able to track people in their favorite terrain, learn the exact number of people, and how long ago they passed through the area. So, I mean, just those abilities alone, I think don't get enough love.
No, there's a lot of dungeon masters don't know how to use them, which is the only real problem with a lot of the things that Ranger does. But the only reason
Yep.
Ranger gets a lot of flack is because of how bad Beastmaster was. All the other Ranger subclasses are more or less fine, and some of them are even very strong, like Gloom Stalker
Yes.
and Fey Wanderer.
Yeah.
They're
So,
very strong subclasses.
and some of that hate might come because one of the most famous NPCs or heroes of the Forgotten Realms in D&D is Dritz, who is a Beastmaster.
I know, and unfortunately, they really made that subclass very weak in 5th edition, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But they kind of redeemed themselves with Drake Warden. Drake Warden seems very fun. The Dragon Companion is kind of what Beastmaster should have been,
Yep.
but it's not. So, but Drake Warden's very cool. It's the only class in Dungeons and Dragons which gives you access to a dragon.
Very good point. My favorite is actually Gloom Stalker. So you choose your subclass at 3rd level, and with this one, you actually get dark vision if you don't have it already, which is pretty cool. And you basically become invisible to those that rely on dark vision when it's dark, which basically gives you advantage on all of your attacks. The only bad thing is your party can't see you to heal you either if they
Or
rely on
ban
dark
you from
vision.
Spirit Guardians.
Yeah, exactly. So watch out for those and place yourself, appropriately.
The only one of the people always say, "Oh, but is there a Ranger subclass you would take to level 20?" The answer for me to that one is Fey Wanderer, because it turns Misty Step into Dimension Door. So you can bonus action Misty Step your allies away from things, which is always fun.
Yeah, Horizon Walker is pretty neat thematically because they're basically their favored terrain, you could say, is walking the plains.
Yep.
So if you have a campaign that's going in between different realms, like that's just going to make it a lot easier because they can read portals, and I mean, just that alone is going to be able to, help the party decide where they want to go next.
The other, so we're starting to get a little bit low on time here, so we're going to move on to Rogue. Rogue is that subclass, is that class that everybody loves to think is the most powerful, but that's because a lot of campaigns are low level, and Rogue shine between levels 1 and 7. But after level 7, Rogue kind of takes a little bit of a nosedive, but it still is one of the strongest skill monkeys along with Bard in terms of doing all the things outside of combat. So it's not that Rogues are bad, it's just that they're a little overrated in combat, specifically at higher levels.
That said, their sneak attack dice damage, if they can get sneak attack to pop off, either with advantage or an ally beside them most of the time, does scale pretty decently, even though they don't get extra attack.
It's one of those things though where like your fighter with sharpshooter or your wizard or lots of other, like all your other classes are going to outpace the rogue for damage later, but the rogue strength is still always going to be outside of combat with their reliable talent.
Yeah, well, they have some pretty good saving throws. I've had complete groups fail an int save.
And then that one rogue saves against the mind flare and somehow saves the day.
Exactly. So that they can definitely hold their own, and they got a lot of great subclasses. The assassin allows you to basically crit if you surprise people, get that quick kill in. It's
Surprise is very hard to get.
Very situational, yes, but it is pretty cool. The soul knife and their psychic blades are amazing, allowing you to not leave a trace, story wise, as there's no weapon involved.
Scout is really fun, but a lot of the things that Scout likes to do kind of got eaten by steady aim. Thief, same with Thief, because fast hands also uses the same thing as steady aim.
But they can use any magic item.
Yeah, they're the first ones who got that ability, was the Thieves, where you could have access to any magic items. You see thieves wearing robes of the Magi, and that's kind of funny.
Yeah. All right, let's skip to Sorcerer. Okay, so we're finishing off with my favorite magic using classes.
Yeah.
So Sorcerer, you didn't learn your magic, you were born with it. And you also get an ability, regardless of your subclass, called Metamagic, which really allows you to be more versatile than a wizard. The abilities with meta magic are just pretty amazing. You can fire things further, you can make things stronger, you can make spells last longer. You can cast spells on a bonus action.
So I was gonna say, so Jeremy, how does Quicken Spell work?
Yes. So, okay, don't make this mistake. If you quicken a spell and cast it as a bonus action for the rest of the turn, you are only casting cantrips. Okay? But, if you want to do it, go for it.
Like, you cannot cast a fireball and then quicken a firebolt. That's not a thing you can do.
You cannot cast counter spell.
That's the one that catches people a lot, because counterspell is not a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action.
But what they do get that helps them out with counterspell is the metamagic ability Subtle Spell, so that you don't use somatic or verbal components, which means that nobody can counterspell you because they don't even know you're casting.
They also have some of the really cool subclasses. Aberrant Mind's a really fun one that they added that gives you kind of some psychic abilities. Lets you do some fun things with Quicken Spell, Dissonant Whispers into a Booming Blade with Warcaster. That's always going to be kind of fun. Clockwork Soul
is pretty classic, I was going to say. A lot of people use that. You get a bump in AC and you get some elemental damage affinity with whatever dragon type you choose.
Clockwork Soul lets you play with time a little bit, time and order. It's kind of fun. It's tricky to make work really well, but there are some fun abilities in there.
And it is not chronomancy.
No, unfortunately. Divine Soul is probably my favorite of them, because it takes the Cleric spell list and allows you to pair them with meta magic.
Yeah, that's pretty potent.
Twin spell, Death Ward, Quicken Spell, Spirit Guardians, little fun things like that.
It's still not as good as the Unearthed Arcana. I think it was the first Unearthed Arcana.
Oh, you keep talking about that. I never saw it.
Yeah, so good. And then Wild Magic. We alluded to it before when we were talking about Barbarians. With Wild Magic Surge. So Dungeon Master, and about when you can surge. And basically, you're going to roll a d20 after casting a spell. If you roll a 1, then you're rolling on a d100 table, and all sorts of crazy stuff can happen. You can shrink, you can turn blue, you can cast Fireball on yourself, you can gain hit points.
You can start a 5th level magic missile at the enemy boss. You can turn yourself into a potted plant. You can turn yourself into a goat.
yeah. So there's lots of crazy stuff that can happen. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But alongside it, you get Tides of Chaos, which, again, talk with your Dungeon Master as to how this can work best with your class. And it's almost like the Barbarian's ability to attack recklessly.
Yeah, and then if your Dungeon Master is really, really nice, they'll let you surge on your next spell so that they can give you Tides of Chaos back.
Exactly. All right, let's go to one of my favorite classes, Warlock.
You mean the Eldritch Blast Cannon?
Yes, exactly. So for me, Warlocks just, much like the Cleric, they come in with a lot of flavor. And if you're a DM, you have a lot of really cool tools you can use, in that a Warlock doesn't learn their magic. They are not born with it. They have basically made a deal with some higher power. Are they good? Are they bad? Do they even really know who they are?
That's the big one.
You can really mess with that. But their casting is kind of weird. We haven't dove into what a spell slot is, but Warlocks really, for most of the game, only have 2 spell slots, whereas others, have tons. So, but they get their spell slots back on a short rest, which, is pretty good. So if you're a Warlock, you're going to have a lot of short rests, but there's also this really cool ability or set of abilities that you can get over time that can add all sorts of different either spells or spells, and these are the Eldridge Vocations. Yeah, you can cast Mage Armor at will. You can speak
detect magic
animals at will. Yeah, detect magic at will. So hey, wizard, you're taking 10 minutes to save a spell slot.
Here, let me flip this candle, detect magic.
Yeah, exactly. reading all languages.
That's always a fun one. Rise of the Dreamkeeper is
Yeah,
underrated.
there's a lot of really cool story, type elements that you can really enhance with all these different Eldritch invocations. In terms
Or
of
you can do what 90% of players do and buff up either Eldritch Blast or your Pact
yeah,
Blade weapon.
exactly. And so there are kind of beyond just your patron that kind of helps you with some extra spells you can choose from. So unlike a cleric, these aren't spells that are automatically prepared. These are spells that are on your list that you can choose from, unfortunately. But at third level, you choose a pact boon. So either you're going to want to maybe be a, more of a melee or potentially ranged, weapon based uh, warlock, and you'd be choosing Pact of the Blade. Pact of the Chain gets you an additional list of familiars, which includes Imp, Pseudo Dragon, Quasit, and Sprite, which are really cool. They give you some extra abilities. They can turn into different forms or perhaps invisible, so they're great scouts. Pact of the Tome is the one that gives you more spell casting options. You get some cantrips from any
Ritual
class.
casting if you take the right invocation.
Exactly. So really cool stuff. In terms of subclasses, I think most people are going to say that Hexblade is their favorite because you get medium armor proficiency and proficiency with shields, which gives you better AC. You can use Charisma to do melee attacks, and with the
Or
right
ranged.
invocations, ranged as well. And the Pact of the Blade, and can also use two-handed weapons, again, with the
Improved
right
Pact weapon.
invocations and such.
Now, Genie Warlock is one that they added that someone in chat just mentioned. Genie Warlock is really, really good because it allows you to do some even more fun things with your spells, like take Crusher with Eldritch Blast, because you can have the one that does bludgeoning damage, so your Eldritch Blast also knocks back things even further than with Repelling Blast. It's kind of fun. And they also get Limited Wish at level 14, which is absolutely absurd.
And it's the only warlock that has wish that they can choose as Mystic Arcanum.
Correct.
Because they don't cast 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells. They don't have spell slots for those.
They
Because
can do them
once. That's right. So, kind of cool still. Okay, now, if you want to be a god as a character, then you want to pick this last class, Wizard. Because, come on, when you have access to a spell book that can pretty much cast the most useful, I would say, spells in the game, Wish, like sure, Sorcerer can cast it too, but come on, I mean,
Bard can cast it too, but at the same time,
yeah, but a Wizard is just going to have way more versatility across the number of spells that they have access to. Yes, you can't prepare them all, but you can just do so many amazing things.
the unprepared rituals is a very big one.
Yeah, and the subclasses, to me, they don't add a lot.
There's two classes of subclass basically.
Yeah.
Well, some of the new ones add some interesting things, but there's all the different schools that allow you to have a cheaper spell that gives you some kind of neat things based on that type of spell. Like Evocation is going to be the one that blows things up and saves allies. Divination is going to give you portents, which are amazing, but they're all going to give you that one little ability or big ability, like portents, for example, that are
insane.
Yeah, portents is so strong. That are going to give you kind of like a bit based on that one school that you choose. They're going to give you some fun things that you can do with those kinds of spells. The other ones are War Magic, Scribes, and Blade Singing. Those are the three that are kind of the outliers. Blade Singing, you're going to be the super tank wizard that has like the super high armor class. That's going to have that's going to be able to tank like with like 30 AC fairly easily.
30 AC on a wizard.
38, and that's like low end. I've seen Blade Singers with like 36, 37. It's absolutely insane.
Yep.
War Magic is kind of cool because it allows you to concentrate on spells a little bit better. When you're concentrating on something, you get basically +2 to AC and saving throws. It also lets you do some fun things like boost damage a little bit. And it's the wizard that gives you your intelligence modifier to initiative, which is kind of fun. And then Order of Scribes. Order of Scribes is absolutely bonkers. Where you
Totally.
can do things like change damage types on a whim. You want to cast Fireball that does psychic damage, you can do that.
Yeah.
You want to cast Fireball that does radiant damage. You want to cast Meteor Swarm that does force damage. You want to do things like multi-class, which we've talked about previously, and cast the Lightning Disintegrate and Channel Divinity Path with the Tempest Cleric when we talked about earlier and maximize it. There we go.
Bonkers.
The Scribes is so much fun, and I haven't even talked about
Yes.
the fact that their spell book is literally or their friend that can
Yeah.
become aware.
It is the one subclass that actually feels like a subclass.
Yeah, as opposed to all like
Other than
Blade.
Bladesinger.
There was Bladesinger and all the other ones, and then there's
Yeah.
Scribes.
Exactly. But that's our quick rundown of all the classes in D&D.
We could probably spend an entire episode on each class if we wanted to, pretty easily.
Easily, totally. But we just want to pique your interest, for different options you can take. We encourage everyone to try, each of the classes themselves, as the opportunities arise. If you would like more opportunities to play, as I mentioned, we run a Discord server and are looking to, get back into in-person events and through fan meetups and, of course, at Fan Expo. Our group is Unite the Factions. You can find us at unitethefactions.com. And, of course, if you want to, hear more about D&D, you can check out meetups.fanexpohq.com, where we host all different kinds of Dungeons and Dragons events, as do some of our other fan meetups ambassadors.
And with that, we're going to conclude this episode. We ran a little bit over time, but we kind of knew we were going to. We kind of said we even started trying to really rush at the end. Like you could tell, like you're going to see at the beginning of this one, we talked about a lot more than we did at the end. But
for sure, especially the clerics.
Because clerics are just so dynamic.
Yeah, so diverse. So thanks everybody, and we'll catch you at our next one.
Good night, everyone.